My name is Evelyn Reed. I wasn't the golden child. I was the one they erased. Quietly, methodically, and with a smile. While Vanessa got praise, stories, and scholarships, I got dishes, silence, and excuses. For years, I thought I was imagining it. Until the day I found the letter my mother hid. The one that said I had been chosen. Chosen and stolen from. They called me selfish for walking away. But now they're suing me for what they think I owe them. Money, silence, my name. What they don't know is I kept every receipt. Before I show you how I proved their lies in court, how I reclaimed the legacy they tried to bury, tell me in the comments. Have you ever been punished just for not being their favorite? And hit subscribe if you've ever had to fight for the truth they tried to silence. The scent of roasted turkey still lingered in the air, thick and warm, mixing with cinnamon and disappointment. The house pulsed with the aftershocks of another Reed Thanksgiving. Vanessa's laughter, clinking glasses, Mom's sharp praises wrapped like presents no one else could open. I was elbow deep in dishes, sleeves rolled, scouring a pan that hadn't even touched my plate. Vanessa had just finished recounting her debate team victory, again. They called me irreplaceable, she beamed. The applause was real, like a closing act at the symphony. I caught Dad winking at her across the table. I wanted to believe love could be earned, that if I scrubbed harder, studied longer, smiled bigger, they'd finally see me. But the harder I tried, the more Mom sighed, looked at me like I was some odd extension of herself she wished she could amputate. Annoying, inconvenient. Evelyn! Grandma Eleanor's voice drifted into the kitchen, a sharp but gentle contrast. She carried a silver tray, setting it down beside me with a soft clink. Let them revel. You're building something they can't see yet. She started drying the plates beside me, her hands slower than they used to be, but firm. You know, she said, not looking at me. When you were in 10th grade, you applied for that STEM scholarship through the library system, right? I paused, hand frozen mid-scrub. Yeah. Well, she said, drying the same fork for too long. Susan hid the letter, said it wouldn't be appropriate for someone like you to get disappointed by a rejection. The sponge dropped from my hand. It hit the sink with a thud louder than the conversation in the next room. She what? Eleanor didn't soften her gaze. She opened it, saw you were shortlisted, and buried it. Never told you. I couldn't breathe for a moment. I leaned on the counter, the world tilting just enough to notice. It wasn't just in my head then. The silence, the staring, the subtle theft of chances. She told me, Eleanor added, that it wasn't worth your heart breaking over something she knew you'd never win. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just nodded. And that night, I opened my journal and wrote until my hand cramped. Every word Eleanor had ever spoken to me. Every piece of wisdom. Every breadcrumb. Write down the truth before they try to rewrite it, she had said once. The house began to quiet. Dad and Mom had gone to tuck away dishes of leftovers for Vanessa's dorm. She got to take the cranberry sauce. The good kind. I got the bones. Later, I walked past the den. Eleanor was staring at the fireplace, swirling tea. Quiet. She caught my gaze. Don't say anything, she murmured, nodding toward the hallway. Susan thinks secrets only stay hidden because she's clever. What do you mean? She smiled. Not kind, not cruel, just tired. You saw it, didn't you? The bank statement? That morning, I'd passed the open study door and glimpsed a printed log, a transfer of $4,000 from Eleanor's retirement account to a checking account with Susan's name. She's buying Vanessa a car, Eleanor said. Said it was urgent. I only knew because the teller at Westville called me. Confused. I sat down beside her. She stared into her tea. Your mother has many talents. Honesty isn't one of them. Why would she do that? Eleanor's eyes burned brighter than the fire. Because she thinks the world owes Vanessa everything. And you? You're just the echo of what she never wanted to become. I didn't know what to say, but I knew something had shifted. Something ancient and bitter and invisible had cracked. You won't confront her, Eleanor said. Not yet. That's not who you are. No, I admitted, eyes fixed on the shadows cast by the fire. But I won't forget. A long pause passed between us until Eleanor leaned forward, her voice suddenly sharp with intent. If you ever need to prove you're not crazy, open my desk drawer. At college, no one knew my last name, and for once I didn't correct them. The first time someone called me Eve L., I smiled. Not because it was right, but because it wasn't wrong enough to hurt. In a place where no one knew Vanessa, or Susan's razor words, or the way my father used to say, let's not expect too much from Evelyn. I felt weightless, unseen in the best possible way. I left Connecticut in the fall of 2011 without looking back. There was no farewell dinner, no hug from Mom, just a train ticket and one suitcase of clothes, books, and code notebooks. I disappeared from their lives so cleanly it was as if I'd never existed. College didn't last long. After 2 semesters of lectures and ramen, I dropped out to take a junior developer role at a small Boston firm. The pay was laughable, but I had my own desk, a login, and a boss who remembered my name. At least most days. That first winter, I shared a 1-bedroom in Alston with 2 other girls. I coded from 9 to 6, freelanced until 2 in the morning, and still found time to squirrel away $50 here, $100 there. Not for a car, not for clothes, for something else. Something mine. Brightline started on a legal pad over black coffee and a missed shift. My classmate Nick pitched the first model. I wrote the code. He handled the pitch decks. It felt like flying, until he took the prototype, repackaged it, and sold it to a recruiter in DC without telling me. I got a text. This just wasn't working out. Sorry. I didn't reply. By 2016, I rebuilt the architecture from scratch, alone this time. Diane came in the following year. She was sharp, skeptical, and asked too many questions, but she stayed through every broken deployment and each sleepless night before demo day. You don't talk about your family, she said once over Thai takeout. I talk about the code. You never go home for the holidays. I don't like turkey. She raised an eyebrow. You name your servers after women, Eleanor, Ruth, Ada, but no Evelyns. I didn't answer. It wasn't until 2019 that Brightline posted its first real profit. I didn't buy a car. I didn't move. I created a scholarship fund, $25,000, for girls in Connecticut who wanted to study software engineering. I named it after Eleanor. No one from Manchester knew. I made sure of it. It wasn't bitterness. It was survival. If they didn't want me when I was 17, they didn't get to want me now that I was something. Then, out of nowhere, the past rang back. It was a Tuesday. Diane had just presented our new security module to a fintech group when my phone buzzed. Unknown number. Connecticut area code. Hello? Silence. Then a breath. Evelyn? The voice was familiar in the worst way. Light, practiced. Vanessa. I said nothing. Mom told me to ask you something, she said. It's about inheritance. Do you have a name on anything? Not how are you, not I'm sorry, not even a long time no talk. Just inheritance. I don't know what you're talking about, I replied, voice steel. She didn't flinch. Then you should check. That's what Mom said. Click. I stared at the screen. Diane walked in, saw the color drain from my face. Everything okay? Yeah, I lied. Just spam. But that night, I sat in bed and reread every document I had on Brightline, the Eleanor Fund, my assets, my shares. I started to feel something press down on my lungs, a name from the past tugging at everything I'd tried to build. 3 days passed. Then a thick envelope arrived in the mail. Cream paper, embossed lettering, my name in sharp print, summons to probate court, state of Connecticut. Vanessa's call wasn't just a warning. It was a move. And now they were coming for what they thought I owed them. It wasn't betrayal. It was arithmetic. One daughter gave, the other took. Guess which one they sued? I stood outside the probate courthouse with the summons in hand and a hollow throb in my chest. The marble steps looked the same as they did in the brochures. Sturdy, ceremonial. I imagined Susan's heels clicking across them with a certain smugness. Harold's silence trailing behind like a shadow. Inside the manila folder Gregory handed me were the words I thought I'd never read. Petition. Evelyn Reed exploited familial proximity to manipulate and unfairly benefit from the estate of the late Eleanor May Reed. Manipulate, benefit, proximity. My jaw tightened. I hadn't spoken to them in over a decade. I hadn't even sent a Christmas card. But that didn't stop them from trying to rewrite the story. I called Diane after Gregory left. "They're suing you?" she said, nearly choking on her coffee. "For what? Loving your grandmother too much?" "They're framing it as undue influence. That's rich, coming from the people who never bought you a birthday cake." I didn't respond. My eyes drifted to the note I'd taped to my mirror 3 years ago. "Stay quiet. Stay sharp. Remember where the bodies are buried." It was metaphor, of course, but now I needed to dig. 2 days later, I drove to Manchester. The air was colder than I remembered. November had painted the trees in crimson and ash, but the house stood untouched, as if frozen in 2003. Same faded blue shutters, same uneven porch step, same pit in my stomach. Vanessa opened the door with her arms crossed. "You're not supposed to be here until the hearing." "I'm not here for a fight." "Mom's not going to." "I'm not here for her either." She squinted. "Then what?" I smiled thinly. "To say goodbye." The lie came easy. Inside, nothing had changed. The dining table still creaked on the left leg. The family photos still excluded me after age 17. I walked the hallway slowly, memorizing creaks, pauses, opportunities. "Mind if I go upstairs?" I asked. Vanessa shrugged. "Knock yourself out." I climbed quietly, heart pounding. Eleanor's room was at the end of the hall, still shut, still sacred. When I turned the brass knob, it gave with a whisper. The room smelled like lavender and old paper. The bedspread had been washed, but the edges still bore the faint yellowing of age. I went straight for the oak desk. It was heavier than I remembered. 3 drawers on the right, 2 on the left. I pulled each, careful not to disturb the order. Receipts, old insurance policies, a pair of reading glasses. Nothing. Then I saw the book. It was tucked behind the drawer. Women in the Law, Forgotten Cases. Fitting. I opened the cover. Nothing. But as I flipped the pages, a single folded parchment slipped out and fluttered onto the floor. My breath caught. It was her handwriting. Looped, precise. The first page, a letter of gratitude, regret, and apology. The second page, notarized, dated December 3rd, 2010. 2 weeks before Eleanor passed away. To whom it may concern, the remainder of my personal holdings are intended solely for my granddaughter, Evelyn Reed, whose presence gave me peace in my final years. I declare this of sound mind, uncoerced and free of obligation. I blinked fast. My fingers trembled as I refolded the pages. Downstairs, Susan waited in the kitchen with a glass of wine. Her face twisted at the sight of me. "I hope you're not rifling through her things." "I knew it existed," I said, holding the letter like a dagger. "I just didn't think you'd have the guts to go looking for it first." Her eyes narrowed. "That's not a legal document. That's scribble." "Then why hide it?" I didn't. "No," I said, "because if I check your closet, the box of letters she wrote me from 2005 to 2009 wouldn't be there." She paled. I turned and left. Back in Boston, I handed the document to Gregory without a word. He scanned the first page, then the second. His mouth moved without sound. "Evelyn," he said at last, tapping the seal gently. "Your grandmother notarized this part. It could overturn the whole case." My mother looked straight at me across the courtroom and lied. Not hesitated. Lied. The courtroom wasn't full, but it felt suffocating. Every cough echoed, every footstep dragged across linoleum like thunder. The fluorescent lights hummed above us, indifferent. Outside the tall, narrow windows, Hartford was being dusted with the first snow of December. Pure, quiet, mocking. Susan Reed sat 3 rows ahead of me, draped in charcoal and faux solemnity. Her lipstick matched her ambition. Sharp, flawless, unnatural. Harold, as always, hovered a step behind, eyes glassy with manufactured grief. They looked like a grieving couple out of central casting. No Vanessa. No surprise. Case number 22-1045 Reed vs. Reed, the bailiff announced. Judge Darnell didn't look up at first. She flipped through the file, then removed her glasses slowly. I understand this is a preliminary hearing concerning allegations of undue influence and financial misconduct. We'll proceed with statements and evidence review. Gregory adjusted his tie, then stood. Your Honor, my client, Evelyn Reed, was named in a notarized letter written by the late Eleanor May Reed. This letter contradicts the plaintiff's claim that Evelyn unduly benefited from the estate. We are prepared to present the original document, along with supporting financial records. Susan shot me a look then. Cold, clean, confident. Judge Darnell nodded. Plaintiffs, your statement? Susan stood, eyes wet, voice perfectly measured. Your Honor, we are devastated. My mother passed in confusion. She never mentioned any special bequest to Evelyn. We believe this alleged letter is a fabrication, perhaps something created posthumously to support Ms. Reed's attempt to redirect funds. I stared at her. Not a single pause. Not even a breath of doubt. She continued, And the foundation Evelyn named after Eleanor? We were never informed. Never asked. My mother would have wanted that money for the family, not some vanity project. Gregory raised one eyebrow, then stepped forward. We'd like to enter into evidence. Exhibit A. He placed the envelope carefully on the table. Inside, Eleanor's letter. Original ink, crisp folds, and a notary seal embossed like a quiet scream. Judge Darnell leaned forward. Gregory continued. The document is dated December 3rd, 2010, 2 weeks prior to Eleanor Reed's death. The signature and notary information match official records on file in the State Archive. Additionally, we submit Exhibit B, a financial transaction dated July 5th, 2019, showing Evelyn Reed's personal funds, specifically $25,000, transferred to an education grant titled the Eleanor Foundation. The courtroom air shifted. Susan leaned toward Harold, whispering frantically. Judge Darnell flipped the letter over, then looked to Susan. Mrs. Reed, did you at any point notify probate court of this letter's existence? Susan blinked. No, because we didn't know it existed. Yet your daughter testified, under oath, that Evelyn fabricated it. Susan hesitated. I may have misspoken. Gregory was relentless. Or lied. The judge held up a hand. Let's stay professional, Mr. Vance. Then she turned to me. Ms. Reed, did your grandmother ever express intent to leave you a portion of her estate? Yes, I said calmly. She told me that she would leave something no one else deserved to touch. Susan scoffed. The judge didn't flinch. You may be seated. She sat in silence for a full 30 seconds, reviewing both documents. Then she exhaled through her nose, a short, decisive breath. If the signature and notary seal hold up, we're not just talking about a family dispute. We're talking about perjury. Susan jerked upright in her seat. That letter was supposed to be buried. Judge Darnell raised an eyebrow. Excuse me? Susan's voice was sharp now, cracking. That should have been burned with her coffin. Gasps. From somewhere in the back, a quiet shuffle. Diane, seated alone, shifting forward ever so slightly, face unreadable. Gregory stood again. Your Honor, we request a mandatory financial disclosure from the plaintiffs within 5 business days. We have reason to believe estate funds were moved by parties other than the defendant. Request granted. The gavel fell once. As we filed out of the room, snow had started to thicken, coating the sidewalk in hush. But Susan's voice echoed long after the doors closed. The funny thing about lies, they always leave paper trails. Diane slid the file across my desk like it was radioactive. Her hands were steady, but her jaw was tight. I cross-referenced everything they submitted to the court, she said, tapping a post-it with her nail. And then I compared it to what I found in our archive. I looked down. Pages of emails, attachments, transaction logs, and a name I hadn't read in a decade. Evelyn Reed Revocable Trust. Vanessa's email account. Diane continued. I checked the metadata. Back in 2016, she emailed Harold 3 times from her work server, all regarding reallocation of funds, coded like they were budgeting something. But the attachments? They're just forms from Eleanor's original trust. My stomach turned. I'd spent years trying to forget the shape of that word. Trust. Because in my family, it meant anything but. Did you find the actual transfers? I asked. Diane nodded. 2. Small enough to avoid flagging, but both from the trust's reserve account to a private account under H.S. Reed Holdings. That's not even their legal business. Gregory joined us 5 minutes later, briefcase in one hand, coffee in the other. I handed him the folder without a word. He flipped to the email printouts, then to the bank transfer records. His eyebrows didn't move, but the air around him tightened. This changes everything. I stood and grabbed my coat. There's more. I'm heading to Eleanor's bank. He frowned. They're not going to just hand over anything. They will when I show them this. I pulled the old key from my bag, a tarnished silver thing with the number 43 etched into the handle. Diane's eyes widened. Is that? She gave it to me when I turned 18, said I'd know when to use it. The bank sat quiet in the snow-dimmed afternoon. It still smelled like pine cleaner and caution. The vault attendant raised an eyebrow when I presented the key, but once my ID matched the records, they escorted me downstairs. Inside box 43 was an old leather-bound ledger, the kind that creaks when opened. The last entry, January 3rd, 2011. The line item read, Trust Fund, locked with condition. No disbursement without both signatures. Eleanor's and Harold's. Only one ever signed. I took photos of everything. The signature pages, the entries, the footnotes. By the time I returned to Brightline, Vanessa had called twice. I let her third call go through. Evelyn, please, she said, voice hoarse. I didn't know Dad did that. I swear. I never touched a cent. He told me it was tuition help. I said nothing. She sniffed. Mom made me believe you were hiding money. I didn't know they'd twist things like this. That's the thing about truth, I replied, calm and quiet. You don't get to claim it late. I hung up. That night, I spread the evidence across the conference table. Gregory took each page slowly, methodically. Diane stood behind him, arms crossed, silent but solid. These aren't just mistakes, he muttered. These are intentional withdrawals. Concealed accounts? False statements to probate. I handed him the final folder. Inside, a 1-page summary I'd drafted myself. They didn't just betray me. They cheated the law. He closed the folder, set his hands on it like sealing a casket. We can countersue, he said, voice low. Fraud, embezzlement, attempted defamation. The snow was falling harder outside now, soft, relentless. I turned to the window. Should we? I whispered. Neither of them answered. I could ruin them. The question is, should I? The courtroom felt smaller now. Not because anything had changed, but because I had. My grandmother once said that when you truly grow, you don't look up to your demons anymore. They shrink beneath you. Susan and Harold sat 3 rows to my right, their faces drawn, tired. No longer actors, just people who had run out of script. Gregory stood as the judge took her seat. Your Honor, after reviewing the submitted evidence, including the notarized letter dated December 3rd, 2010, and financial records provided voluntarily by Ms. Reed's counsel, We request final dismissal of all claims against Ms. Evelyn Reed. Judge Darnell looked over her glasses, then nodded. The court finds the letter to be legitimate and the evidence consistent with lawful ownership and transfer of funds. Case dismissed with prejudice. The gavel struck once. The silence afterward didn't feel like victory. It felt like release. As the judge gathered her papers, I stood. Gregory leaned toward me and whispered, "Now's the time. We can file a countermotion before they even leave the building." I looked at the file in his hand. Names, statements, lies documented and organized for war. And then I looked at them. Harold avoided my eyes. Susan stared, not pleading, just blank, empty. She'd spent so long crafting a version of me that served her story. She couldn't recognize the one who stood now. Vanessa sat a few feet away, her head down, fists clenched in her lap. I walked to the center of the room. "Your Honor," I said softly, "I will not be filing a counterclaim." Gregory's head snapped toward me. I continued. They forged records, lied under oath, took what wasn't theirs, but I'm not here for revenge. I'm here for peace. Judge Darnell gave a slow, neutral nod. "Very well, the court notes the withdrawal." I turned to face my family, no longer afraid. "From now on, you'll live with the truth, and I'll live free." The last thing I saw before leaving was Vanessa raising her eyes, just once, and not looking away. Later that day, I sat in Gregory's office as he finalized the paperwork. Diane brought in a tray of coffee, then paused at the door. "I wasn't sure you'd let them go," she said, almost a whisper. "I didn't," I replied. "I just did."